I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, police arrest a 14-year-old in a deadly shooting inside a Toronto high school.
Was described to me as an execution, with the suspect running up behind the victim and shooting him at point-blank range.
We'll have details on what police say unfolded inside the school and what we've learned about the 18-year-old victim. Plus,
Chief Peter Slowly is no longer employed with the Ottawa Police Service.
Facing criticism over his handling of the ongoing anti-mandate protests, Ottawa's police chief has stepped down. And
what makes this site different? Politics, it would seem.
The political push on the way to transform these housing components into much-needed homes for dozens of families. Investigators are describing the shooting death of an 18-year-old student inside David and Mary Thompson Collegiate as an execution. Tonight, they've charged a 14-year-old with murder and attempted murder. Social workers were on hand today to help students in the wake of this tragedy. Talia Ricci now with the latest.
Today, this Scarborough Community Center serves as a safe place for students to process what happened at their school.
It's really sad what happened, seeing a young male losing his life. Basically, it's terrifying.
The Toronto District School Board says social workers, psychologists, and teachers are ready to help. These emotional supports will continue tomorrow.
Grief, anger, sadness, fear, and that there's space and people, adult allies in their life who can support them and care for them through it.
The shooting happened just after class let out at David and Mary Thompson Collegiate yesterday. Police say it was caught on video.
Information yesterday, it was described to me as an execution. I've seen the video which captures the murder, and that's exactly how I would describe it, with the suspect running up behind the victim and shooting him at point-blank range.
Police said there was some interaction between the two prior to the shooting. Police say the suspect then pointed a gun at another teen, but it didn't fire. The 14-year-old cannot be named under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. He was arrested Monday evening and charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. Today, officials addressed a concerning trend.
This year alone, 1/3 of our homicides have involved victims or accused under the age of 20. 2 have involved accused persons under the age of 15 years. This fact is disturbing and demands that something must change.
How could it be that a 14-year-old could first of all have a gun? And how could it be that the 14-year-old could decide to take the gun to school? And how could it be that a 14-year-old could decide to use the gun? And these are all questions that aren't just superficial questions. They're deep, complicated questions that we have to start to come to grips with.
A GoFundMe was started today by Robinson's aunt. It describes him as a loving man who cared deeply about his family. Police are asking anyone who was in the area around 3 o'clock yesterday who might have cell phone or dash cam footage to contact them. The TDSB says the school will remain closed tomorrow. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
While protesters blocking the borders in some parts of the country are starting to leave, demonstrators in front of Parliament Hill are digging in, adding to the frustration of residents today, finding out that the city's police chief has stepped down. News that some protesters are claiming as a win for their cause. Olivia Stefanovic has more.
Jubilation on the convoy front lines as word spreads about Peter Slowly's resignation.
I'm elated. Thank you, Lord. Hopefully it's one of many. Used to play dominoes when I was a kid. Hopefully you see some dominoes here.
While protesters claim a victory, Ottawa police scramble to find a new leader.
Frankly, the response to this crisis so far has been ineffective at bringing this occupation to an end and restoring peace and security in Ottawa. The OPS has been unable to adequately enforce our laws, and our residents continue to be terrorized
as they wait for officers to move in.
It's been frustrating. I am looking forward to see some policing action.
We need somebody there to take control of the whole thing and finish that.
Despite the Emergencies Act taking effect yesterday, protesters remain on the street in front of Parliament Hill, and there's little sign of stepped-up enforcement today.
There will be consequences for people who are breaking the law and people who are supporting those who are breaking the law.
Blockades have cleared at border crossings in Alberta and Windsor, but the situation in the nation's capital remains in deadlock.
Isn't it true that the Prime Minister's actions could serve to actually make things worse and not make things better?
Exactly. The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is about keeping Canadians safe.
The federal government calls the scope of its new measures time-limited, geographically targeted, and urgently needed.
What is driving this movement is a very small, organized group that is driven by an ideology to overthrow the government through whatever means they may wish to use.
Kids are playing street hockey, people dancing on the street, and there is emergency for that. Come on.
But despite the threat for those who stay of having their corporate accounts frozen and vehicle insurance suspended, demonstrators vow to continue holding the line. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Traffic is moving again at the U.S. border crossing near Coutts, Alberta, after a 2-week-long blockade began to clear today. A few protesters were still around the area, but the Canada Border Services Agency says the port of entry has reopened. One of the protest organizers says they decided to leave after learning that the larger demonstration had been infiltrated by extreme elements. During an early morning raid on Monday, police found a cache of weapons and a large quantity of ammunition in 3 trailers near the blockade. Police have since arrested 13 people associated with the Coutts border protest. The Mounties say protesters blocking the U.S. border crossing near Emerson, Manitoba are expected to leave by tomorrow. The blockade has been ongoing since last Thursday. Most of the commercial traffic has been forced across the border from alternate ports in Manitoba and even Saskatchewan. Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos announced the federal government is going to ease COVID-19 border measures for travelers.
Fully vaccinated travelers arriving to Canada from any country in the world will only need to take a PCR COVID-19 test if they are randomly selected.
Starting February 28th, vaccinated travelers will no longer require a PCR molecular test to enter Canada and can instead take a rapid antigen test administered by a lab or healthcare facility. Children who are unvaccinated traveling with vaccinated adults will no longer have to isolate from schools and daycares for 14 days. Some fully vaccinated travelers may still be selected for random testing, but they'll no longer have to quarantine as they wait for results. Colette is busy keeping an eye on some big changes in the weather heading our way.
Oh my goodness, we talk about weather whiplash. Boy, oh boy, this system is going to give it to you. But I'm going to show you kind of a breakdown, at least a general breakdown of how this is going to move through the area and have an impact on you. So let's just give you an idea. We're talking about early in the day tomorrow, increasing cloudiness, some rising temperatures. By the afternoon, we're talking high single digits, so really significant. But the winds will be picking up, becoming quite gusty. We get into the rain showers as we get into the late afternoon and evening hours. Rain 20 to 30 millimeters as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday could mean a flooding risk because we are talking about ground that's frozen, plus there are areas still with lots of snowpack and then that melting. And then into Thursday, this will happen at different times of the day in different parts of southern and eastern Ontario. So if we just kind of look at the GTA, it's likely that this will be towards midday or into the afternoon where that rain changes into some freezing rain, probably even going to be a break in there in the precipitation before it kind of comes back, starts mixing, and then turns over to some snowfall. So that's where we could be seeing some power outages too, some concerns there because of the winds, but also because of the icy conditions. If we get an accretion of ice, that can bring power lines down too. So all of this to say there's a special weather statement for all of southern Ontario because of this system coming in. It's very, very complex in terms of what we're going to be seeing with this, and just very dramatic in terms of the temperature swing that we'll get into with the rise tomorrow and then the drop that we'll have by the time we get to Friday morning. So what happens, the warm front comes in overnight tonight, so the temperatures will begin rising through the overnight hours. Tomorrow morning we'll be up around freezing, tomorrow afternoon up to 8 degrees. Then, of course, that rain also works its way through. Heavy at times, 20 to 30 millimeters. Potential is there. Some of that freezing, that could linger longer, especially in the Niagara region, but we'll kind of be watching the tracking of this. And then snowfall amounts, we could be looking at 10 to, in some cases, 20 centimeters of snow on the backside of this. Most of that late in the day, Thursday and Thursday night. So really poor travel conditions there. This is just a look at some of the rainfall potential there. So here it is. These are our current temperatures. They may still dip a degree or two here into the evening, but the general trend is tonight they're going to be coming up. So in the overnight -3, like I said, 0 by tomorrow morning, 8 at least. I'm thinking by tomorrow afternoon becomes wet for the second part of the day and that commute. And then looking at what happens after that, increase in cloudiness should be there. That temperature swing from 7 in the morning on Thursday to -13 by the time we get to Friday morning.
Right. What a difference a day makes. Just 24
will.
little hours. Thank you, Colette.
Huge changes.
The Premier was in Hamilton today announcing funding for a major steelmaker's efforts to cut carbon emissions.
Right now, car makers are investing billions and billions of dollars, searching for ways to reduce carbon emissions along their supply chain. Well, I have news for all of them. That search starts and ends right here in Hamilton with Dofasco Steel.
The Ford government will kick in $500 million towards Dofasco's efforts to cut its carbon emission in half. The money will help build new electric arc furnaces, which use scrap metal and electricity and natural gas to make steel. Right now, the steel maker uses blast furnaces, which use coal and iron ore. It's hoped the transition will be completed by 2028. Toronto's top doctor has commented on the province's move to loosen COVID-19 restrictions. Dr. Eileen De Villa was asked today if protections need to be extended in Toronto or if the city is ready to relax vaccination mandates.
It is something that is absolutely being looked at this point in time, with the provincial announcement having been made yesterday. And my sense is that we will have more to say on this in the days to come, but certainly are looking forward to what I describe as an era of cautious optimism.
Meanwhile, as part of the city's 10-day Vax the East campaign, officials say they will shift their focus to running pop-up clinics at schools in the city's East End. This comes after what Mayor Tory calls a very successful weekend at its walk-in clinics.
On the weekend, more than 1,760 people were vaccinated at the Science Centre and Thorncliffe Park Community Hub. 69% of those who showed up to get vaccinated were walk-ins. And this is a good thing, because it means that if we make it convenient, then people will come.
This comes as Toronto Public Health is allowing walk-in appointments starting today for third doses of COVID-19 vaccine for youth between 12 and 17 years old at its 5 city-run clinics. The city adds 91% of residents 12 plus have received 1 dose, while 88% have had 2. Just under 63% of eligible residents have been boosted. After waiting nearly a year for the province to fast-track a supportive housing project, the city is taking matters into its own hands, pushing forward the construction of 59 modular housing units in Willowdale. Nellie Kalata now with the details.
Instead of 59 homes to help Toronto's underhoused rebuild their lives, today the front lawn of 175 Cummer Avenue remains empty, covered in snow. The modular units in a parking lot not far away.
There are people who are spending the night outside in that kind of cold who could have had housing. It's just, deplorable.
City Council asked Premier Doug Ford's government to fast-track the modular supportive housing project like it has for others in the city. But after nearly a year of waiting, have yet to receive it. So today, the city began its own longer rezoning process.
We are left with little choice.
In a letter to the Minister of Housing, the local area MPP urged the government not to give the approval until the city has adequately consulted with our community and considered the input of local residents.
Here at my office, it's the #1 issue.
Local MPP Stan Cho says he plans to meet with the city to propose other locations in the area.
The vast majority of people believe that 2 kilometers walking to a grocery store is too far when we have alternative sites in our own neighborhood. Perhaps, on an arterial road that is directly connected to subway that has a grocery at the doorstep.
I cannot leave my building without tripping over a supermarket.
But not everyone is convinced. James Brown lives next to the proposed site.
There's not one reason that I can think of, or not one reason that's been presented to me that would say this is not a good location.
Leaving this councillor wondering how much a looming provincial election is to blame for the delay.
Try to explain that kind of politics to 59 people who could have homes, as we are standing here speaking today on this cold day, whose future homes are stored in a TTC parking lot.
Meaning it may be another 1 to 2 years before the homes are built and ready for tenants. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
Trillium Health Partners has received a historic $105 million donation. That's the largest donation to a hospital in Canada's history. Mississauga's mayor says it's a game changer for the city.
It's a well-known fact that Trillium Health Partners will experience more demand for services than any other hospital over the next 20 years. In fact, 7 times more than the average hospital in the province. This is truly a gift that will last generations to come.
The donation comes from philanthropist Peter Gilligan's foundation. As a thank you, staff put together this video of appreciation. The hospital says the money will be used to replace its existing 62-year-old facility, which will be named the Peter Gilligan Mississauga Hospital. We continue to watch the crisis in Ukraine, where Russia says it is ready to hold security talks with the U.S. and NATO. We'll tell you more about why Russia says they are moving their troops back coming up. A member of the Canadian Elite Basketball League has died while playing overseas. Kenny Edgem was playing for a team in the Bahrain Premier League.
His smile for me was everything. It just was a reflection of his personality and his exuberance for life, and just how he kind of moved along with an excitement and enthusiasm, as I said, just living and enjoying life.
The 27-year-old Edgem was from Brampton and played for the Hamilton Honey Badgers this past season. He was playing for Al Najma in the Bahrain League when he died. The circumstances surrounding his death are unclear. The Canadian Elite Basketball League offering its condolences today to Edgem's family and teammates. Global Affairs Canada says it is aware of the death and is assisting Edgem's family. Prince Andrew has settled a civil lawsuit with Virginia Giuffre, the woman who accused him of sexually abusing her when she was just 17. The tentative deal says the prince will make a substantial donation to Ms. Giuffre's charity in support of victims' rights. She sued the Queen's second eldest son in August 2020. She alleges he was the victim of sex trafficking by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, and she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew, an Epstein associate, when she was underage. Prince Andrew denies the allegations. Russia says some of its troops have been pulled back from positions near the border with Ukraine because planned military drills have come to an end. That comes as world leaders continue to push for solutions to the crisis that has many worried about a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Abby Kuthanasanan has more now from London.
The diplomatic efforts today featured German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Scholz referred to the buildup as incomprehensible and warned of dire consequences should Ukraine's territorial integrity be compromised. And Putin, for his part, reiterated that NATO has not addressed his country's security concerns, mainly guaranteeing Ukraine never joins the alliance. And this is an absolute non-starter for the West, which says Kyiv should decide its own security future. Now, Putin also brought up Nord Stream 2. That's the pipeline project between Germany and Russia. It is not yet functional, and NATO allies have been pressing Berlin to use it as leverage to deter the Kremlin from launching an attack on Ukraine. Putin says this project is purely commercial and politics should not play a part. Scholz would not put it on the table as part of a sanctions package directly, but did say, quote, "We know what we need to do should it come down to it." Meanwhile, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the intelligence he's seeing today is not encouraging. He says British intelligence indicates field hospitals are being built near the Belarus-Ukraine border, which could also signal an imminent invasion. The Kremlin insists Russian soldiers are only in Belarus to participate in military drills, but that does leave about 30,000 Russian forces within striking distance of the Ukrainian capital. Abby Kuwadasan, CBC News, London.